All right, so today we're going to do something a little different. We're going to take three mysteries that on the surface have absolutely nothing to do with each other and use them to ask a really big question. What are the absolute limits of what we can ever truly know? So, let's kick things off with a story. Picture this. It's Nuremberg, Germany, way back in 1828. And out of the blue, this teenage boy just appears. He can barely walk, can hardly form a sentence, and in his hand, he's got a letter. And that letter starts with this absolutely chilling claim. And this boy, this is the story of Kaspar Hauser. We're talking about a mystery on a human scale, but one that's so frustrating because there's just a total lack of information. For almost 200 years, people across Europe have been obsessed with this question. Who was he? And his life, well, it was short, it was bizarre, and it was violent. I mean, look at this timeline. He shows up in 28. A year later, bam, someone tries to kill him. A few years after that, they try again, and this time they succeed. He dies at just 21, still a complete mystery. He was this huge public curiosity, sure, but he was also a victim. The big question was, a victim of what? And basically, two main theories popped up, and they couldn't be more different. On one hand, you have the royal heir theory. The idea that he was a lost prince, hidden away so he couldn't take the throne, and that the assassination attempts were his enemies trying to finish the job. On the other hand, maybe he was a total fraud, a brilliant con artist who made the whole thing up for fame and money. So what do you think? Lost prince or cunning liar? This is where it gets really interesting, though. After almost 200 years of debate, of books and plays about him, what if we could just, solve it? What if we could take the tools of modern science and apply them to this old, cold case? Could we finally get a real answer? And that's exactly what happened. Just this year, in 2024, scientists got their hands on the only physical evidence left of the guy, a lock of his hair and, believe it or not, his blood-stained underwear. They used the latest, most advanced DNA techniques to compare his genetic code to that of the royal family he was supposedly a part of. And the results? Well, he wasn't royalty. It's definitive. He was just some kid. But here's the kicker. Science told us what he wasn't, but it couldn't tell us who he was. Was his story about the dungeon true? Who stabbed him in that garden? We still have no idea. And the really frustrating part, we probably never will. The information, it's just gone. Okay, so keep that idea of lost information in your head, because now we're going to pivot from a mystery caused by missing information to a story where the lack of information was the whole point. It was actually the weapon. This takes us to the Cold War. The US, the Soviet Union, both were looking for an edge. And they started exploring this really terrifying new idea for a weapon. It wasn't about a giant mushroom cloud. No, this was way more subtle. It was about spreading an invisible poison, a radioactive dust, and using fear and uncertainty to control the battlefield. And, they even tried to sell this to the public. Get this, they pitched it as a kind of gentle nuclear war. I'm not kidding. Check out this cover of Popular Science from 1951. It literally asks, can death sand win battles? Like it's some cool new gadget. And the sales pitch was pretty wild. The idea was, look, we don't have to blow up cities. You just spread enough of this stuff to make an area lethal over, say, a 10-day period. It gives people a choice. They can just pack up and leave. It's a rather humane weapon. I mean, when you put it like that, it almost sounds reasonable. Almost. Yeah, except the reality was a total nightmare. Defending against it meant massive lead shielding on everything. The contaminated zones would be unusable for years, and it was so unpredictable. In one US test, the radioactive stuff spread over an area 50% bigger than they planned. And think about the psychological toll. An invisible poison. That's pure terror, and it's a kind of terror you can't really control. So, in the end, the very thing that made this weapon so scary, its uncertainty, its unpredictability, is also why it was never used. Generals like weapons that go boom. They want clear results. Death sand was just too messy, too unpredictable. Its power was its ambiguity, and that made it totally useless as a military tool. Okay, so this brings us to the biggest mystery of all. The one that actually explains why Kaspar Hauser's past is lost forever. Why can't we just rewind the tape? Why is the past always out of reach? Well, the answer isn't in a history book. It's in the fundamental laws of physics. And to get our heads around this, we need to start with a question that sounds simple, but is actually pretty deep. what does the Earth really get from the sun? Now, you're probably thinking, energy, light, heat? And yeah, you're right. But that's only half the answer. See, it turns out the amount of energy Earth gets from the sun is pretty much the same as the amount it radiates back out into space. It's balanced. The real difference is in the quality of that energy. We get these really concentrated, useful, orderly packets of energy from the sun. Think of it like a perfectly stacked deck of cards. Physicists call this low entropy. Then, Earth uses that energy and radiates it back out as messy, disorganized waste heat. The deck of cards has been thrown all over the floor. That's high entropy. Entropy is basically just a fancy word for disorder. A French engineer named Sadi Carnot figured this out like 200 years ago. He was thinking about a perfect, ideal engine. And what he realized is that you can't just turn heat into work with 100% efficiency. It's impossible. You always have to dump some of that energy as waste heat. You always have to make things a little more messy, a little more disordered. You always have to increase entropy. And this right here, this shows you what that looks like on a planetary scale. For every one high-quality, low-entropy photon we get from the sun, the Earth spits back out 20 low-quality, high-entropy photons. So our entire planet, all of life, everything, it's all one giant engine that's constantly taking in order and spitting out disorder. And that is the arrow of time. It's the reason time only seems to go in one direction. The universe as a whole is always moving from a more orderly state to a more disorderly one. You know, you can scramble an egg, but you can't unscramble it. And this is why we can't know who Kaspar Hauser was. The information, the memories, the clues, the truth. It wasn't just lost. It was scrambled. It was spread out and disordered by this unstoppable process. It's gone for good. So there you have it, a strange boy in a German town, a terrifying Cold War weapon, and the very nature of time itself. They all come down to one thing, information, and whether we can get to it. We'll never know. The information has been scattered by the arrow of time. Entropy has made that question fundamentally unanswerable. Because its power came from a lack of information, from uncertainty. But that same uncertainty made it impossible to predict, impossible to control. A failed weapon. And that leaves us with the biggest mystery of all. We know the universe is getting more and more disordered. That's the second law of thermodynamics. But why did it start in such a pristine, perfectly ordered, low-entropy state in the first place? That's the one science can't explain. At least, not yet. It really makes you think about that line from T.S. Eliot's poem, I Will Show You Fear in a Handful of Dust. From the dust of history that covers Kaspar Hauser's secrets, to the literal radioactive dust of a weapon too scary to use, it's all a reminder that some of the greatest mysteries are about what's been lost and what we can never, ever get back.